So, you think you've got a handle on World War II history, right? The major players, the big battles.
Right, the standard narrative we all sort of learn.
Exactly. But imagine stumbling upon this document, published before the U.S. even officially entered the war. And it doesn't just propose, like, a total penalty for an entire nation.
Okay.
It lays out this incredibly detailed blueprint for its complete demographic and, well, cultural annihilation.
Whoa. Okay, that's intense.
And get this. What if that document wasn't some obscure pamphlet nobody ever saw? What if it actually made waves in the American press?
Yeah.
And then became this, like, potent weapon for enemy propaganda?
That changes things quite a bit. It's not just a fringe idea then. It had real impact.
Precisely. This isn't just some uncomfortable historical footnote. It's a direct window into some of the, frankly, darkest corners of wartime thinking.
Indeed. And today we're taking a deep dive into exactly that document. It's a profoundly unsettling book, no doubt about it, but historically significant. It's titled Germany Must Perish by a man named Theodore N. Kaufman.
Germany Must Perish. Doesn't leave much to the imagination.
Not at all. And this isn't just, a historical curiosity for us to observe from a safe distance. It's really a stark reflection of the intense and sometimes extreme proposals that popped up during this pivotal moment in global conflict.
It's a chilling reminder, really, of the lengths some individuals were willing to imagine, at least, to definitively end what they saw as this huge existential threat.
That's the core of it.
So, our mission in this deep dive is pretty clear. We need to explore the actual content of this specific book. What did it really propose? Who was this author, Kaufman? And crucially, how was it received? Both here, domestically and by the other side.
Right. It's about dissecting the arguments he put forward, looking at the factual claims he made, but, and this is important, without ever endorsing the views within it.
Absolutely not. We're examining it as a primary source,
Yeah.
letting it shine a light on a particular mindset, a set of ideas from that specific time, and trying to understand the context where such a proposal could even be conceived, let alone discussed.
And maybe understand why such ideas, however abhorrent they seem now, could get any traction at all back then.
Exactly.
That's precisely right. We're here to understand, not to sit here and debate the moral implications from, our 21st century viewpoint. The goal is to analyze this document as a product of its era,
Right.
to appreciate the factual claims and arguments Kaufman used to justify his proposals, and also to see just how quickly a text like this could be, weaponized in the information warfare of the time.
It forces you to approach this kind of material with a critical lens, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Recognizing the history and the impact, but absolutely not endorsing its extreme, frankly, genocidal viewpoints.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, so to really grasp the impact of Germany Must Perish, we need to start at the beginning. The origins, the author, how it landed in the world. Let's dig into the book and its immediate impact.
Sounds good.
So the author, Theodore N. Kaufman. He was a Manhattan-born Jewish businessman, and interestingly, he also chaired a group he called the American Federation for Peace.
An American Federation for Peace promoting, it's quite a contrast.
Isn't it? And the book title, again, just stark. Germany Must Perish.
Now, what's absolutely crucial here, as you hinted earlier, is the timing of its publication. The first edition seems to have come out in late 1940 or very early 1941.
Right.
Then it was quickly followed by a second, slightly longer, 96-page edition, also in 1941. This one was published by Argyle Press out in Newark, New Jersey.
And the key thing.
Both of these editions hit the shelves before the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941.
Wow. So America was still officially neutral.
Officially neutral. That fact is absolutely paramount to understanding how controversial it was and how far its reception reached.
And that reception is genuinely startling. Despite let's call it what it is, the genocidal nature of the content wiping out an entire people.
Kaufman's proposal wasn't just immediately dismissed as, the ravings of a lunatic.
You'd think it might have been. Right. But it actually received what our source describes as respectful attention in parts of the American press. Can you believe that? Time magazine, for instance, March 24th, 1941, they reviewed it.
And what did they say?
They didn't condemn it as monstrous. They called Kaufman's plan a sensational idea.
A sensational idea. That's quite a framing.
Isn't it? What does that reaction tell us about the mood, maybe the anxieties? in America at that exact moment,
Yeah.
even before we were officially in the war.
Well, it tells us a few things, I think, and it's a pretty profound insight into the psychology of a nation on the edge. First, the level of anti-German sentiment was already incredibly high, even while officially neutral.
Okay, that makes sense.
And there was this desperate, almost primal search for solutions, for a global conflict that just seemed to keep repeating itself and threatening everything.
People were tired of it.
Exactly. And second, the idea of a final solution to German aggression, however radical it sounds to us now, might have appealed to some people who felt that previous attempts, like the Treaty of Versailles, had just failed spectacularly.
Right, the war to end all wars hadn't worked.
Precisely. So the very fact that Time magazine could frame it as a sensational idea rather than something utterly abhorrent speaks to a public discourse that was already wrestling with extreme measures in the face of what felt like an existential threat.
It wasn't mainstream policy, obviously.
Oh, absolutely not. But the fact it could be discussed at all in those terms is really revealing.
That context makes Joseph Goebbels' reaction even more, well, chillingly understandable in a way. Germany's propaganda chief didn't just read the book. He apparently seized on it with almost gleeful enthusiasm.
He saw an opportunity.
Definitely. He privately commented, and this is a direct quote from the source, "This Jew Kaufman has done a disservice to the enemy. If he had composed the book at my behest, he couldn't have done a better job."
Wow. That's quite the endorsement in a twisted way.
It is. What does that tell us about the strategic utility of painting your enemy as holding these incredibly extreme views, even if they come from a sort of fringe source? How did this fuel the narratives already brewing inside Germany?
Well, Goebbels' comment really lays bare the cynical opportunism of wartime propaganda, and its effectiveness is exactly what he's pointing out there.
Right.
For the Nazi regime, Kaufman's book was perfect. It was ready-made evidence to back up their existing stories of victimhood, of facing an existential threat. It let them claim, look, see, this is what the Jews in America are actually planning for you, the German people.
It wasn't about discrediting just Kaufman.
Not at all.
Yeah.
It was about discrediting the entire enemy and specifically tying it to the anti-Semitic tropes that were already so deeply embedded in German society. It helped galvanize the German population to paint the Allies not just as enemies, but as genocidal monsters, which of course helped justify the extreme measures Germany itself was taking.
And Goebbels didn't just think about it, he acted. He specifically directed the German press to plaster Kaufman's call for genocide everywhere.
He knew its value.
We see specific examples. Der Angriff, a Berlin daily paper, ran a front-page article, July 23, 1941, headline screaming, "Diabolical plan for the extermination of the German people,"
And they threw in references to Old Testament hatred.
playing directly into anti-Semitic stereotypes.
Exactly. Extracts from Kaufman's book also showed up in nationally circulated weeklies like Das Reich on August 3, 1941. So this wasn't some quiet internal memo. It became a very public, very powerful tool to whip up anti-Semitic feelings and rally the German people against this perceived genocidal enemy.
Precisely. It shows how a seemingly extreme idea from, let's face it, a private citizen, especially one that aligned with existing biases and fears, could be amplified and used to shape public opinion on a massive scale during wartime.
It wasn't just a reaction, it was a deliberate strategy.
Absolutely. By making Kaufman's proposal seem representative of all enemy intentions, Goebbels could further demonize the Allied cause, help justify German atrocities, and really hammer home the idea to Germans that they were fighting for their very survival against forces bent on wiping them out. It's a stark example of how information warfare works, twisting internal debates for external propaganda, reinforcing that sense of victimhood and existential threat within your own population.
It's textbook manipulation, really.
And this brings us to another really astonishing parallel, one that highlights this, well, darker undercurrent of thought during the war. Kaufman's plan, shocking as it is, wasn't entirely unique in its basic spirit.
There were others thinking along similar lines.
Get this. A prominent American anthropologist, Ernest Houghton, a professor at Harvard University, no less. He published a remarkably similar outbreeding plan.
An anthropologist from Harvard?
Yep. It appeared in an article titled "Breed War Strain Out of Germans" in the PM, which was a New York daily newspaper, on January 4th, 1943. Now, this was after the U.S. ended the war, unlike Kaufman's book.
Okay, so the context is slightly different.
Slightly different. But the fact that an academic from such a prestigious institution was publicly proposing this kind of scheme, it's deeply unsettling.
So what was Houghton proposing? What does outbreeding mean in this context?
His plan was explicitly aimed at, Well, genetically transforming the German nation.
Genetically transforming? How?
He suggested encouraging German women to mate with non-German men who would be brought into the country in large numbers, basically for that purpose.
Wow.
And conversely, German men who would be forcibly held outside Germany would be encouraged to mate with non-German women. This wasn't just like social engineering, it was aiming for genetic engineering on a national scale.
That's staggering. Coming from an academic, it really shows the kind of intellectual desperation or perhaps radicalization that can happen even in supposedly enlightened circles during a total war.
So he wasn't just talking about a short-term fix either, was he?
Oh, far from it.
Yeah.
Houghton also proposed taking a huge number, something like 10 to 12 million German men, and assigning them to forced labor under Allied supervision, but in other countries to rebuild their economies.
Forced labor abroad.
And the stated goals of this whole multi-part plan were incredibly specific. He wanted, and I'm quoting here, reduction of the birth rate of pure Germans, neutralization of German aggressiveness by outbreeding, and denationalization of indoctrinated individuals.
Neutralization by outbreeding. Denationalization.
He figured this whole plan would take at least 20 years to implement, and during that time, he also suggested encouraging the immigration and settlement in the German states of non-German nationals, especially males.
It's a stark example of that ends justify the means thinking, isn't it? Where ethical boundaries just start to crumble under the pressure of perceived existential threat, even if it comes from a different place ideologically than Kaufman.
Absolutely. It highlights a deeply unsettling thought process that clearly gained some traction even among intellectuals during that period. This desperate search for a final solution to the problem of endless war, even if that solution meant fundamentally altering an entire population.
Truly eye-opening, connecting those threads. All right, so we've seen the book's initial splash and its disturbing parallels. Now we need to really dig into the foundations of Kaufman's thinking. What exactly was he proposing, and how on earth did he try to justify such an extreme vision? Let's get into part 2. Kaufman's core thesis and his justification for what he called a total penalty.
Okay, where does he start?
He dedicates the book to those who would rather die fighting for freedom, people who are unafraid, speak out the truth, and who place mankind's needs before their own.
Setting a very high-minded, almost righteous tone from the start.
Right, and he presents the book itself, quite audaciously, as a plan for the structure of a permanent and lasting peace among civilized nations.
A permanent peace through annihilation.
Exactly. His whole premise for this lasting peace is initially based on this hypothetical scenario, the eventual defeat of Germany by the British Empire and its allies, but importantly, without the assistance of the United States.
Ah, so he's setting up an argument for American involvement.
Precisely. But then he immediately adds this crucial call to action. If the U.S. does enter the war, if American lives are sacrificed, it absolutely must not be in vain. He says soldiers need a solemn purpose and a sacred promise, which is an enduring peace. And he really stresses, almost like a preacher, this time that promise must be kept.
He's laying the groundwork, arguing that American sacrifice demands an unprecedented, definitive outcome, something far beyond what traditional warfare usually delivers.
Yeah. Then in the book's opening section, which he pointedly titles, About This Book, Kaufman wastes no time. He declares right off the bat, today's war is not a war against Adolf Hitler, nor is it a war against the Nazis.
Okay, so he's immediately broadening the scope beyond the current regime.
Totally. He explicitly redefines the conflict. He says, it is a war of peoples against peoples, of civilized peoples envisioning light against uncivilized barbarians who cherish darkness.
Strong words. Light versus darkness. Civilized versus barbarians.
And then he makes this sweeping, incredibly inflammatory claim. It is a struggle between the German nation and humanity. This reframing seems absolutely fundamental to his entire argument.
It is absolutely central, because if we connect this to the bigger picture, what Kaufman's doing here is trying to establish this deep, historical, almost inherent war soul within the entire German people.
Not just the Nazis.
Not just the Nazis, not just Hitler. He argues that figures like the Kaiser, Bismarck, Hitler, they're merely the mirrors reflecting centuries-old, inbred lust of the German nation for conquest and mass murder.
So it's not about politics or ideology for him. It's about some fundamental, unchanging national character.
Exactly. And that's crucial for understanding why his proposed solution is so radical. He insists the German people are collectively responsible for this endless cycle of war, therefore they must be made to pay, because otherwise, he argues, there will always be a German war against the world.
So his goal isn't just victory.
No, it's a final halt to German aggression, not a temporary cessation.
And because he sees this inherent war soul, he just throws out any conventional path to peace. He dismisses things like armed mastery, allied occupation, or political or territorial adjustment, just moving borders around.
Those are just sticking plasters, in his view.
Right, and he completely scraps any hope based on a defeated and repentant nation. He thinks that's naive, totally insufficient against future aggression. His logic is relentless. Germany forced a total war upon the world, so she must be prepared to pay a total penalty.
And that total penalty is?
One thing and one thing only. Germany must perish forever, in fact, not in fancy. He even dismisses the idea that it's just the low-class Nazis responsible. He points back to 1914, saying it was the same lust, the same brute force under the highest classes, the Junkers, the intellectuals, and the Reichstag. He argues the aggression is systemic, not isolated to one group or time.
So his argument essentially says that history proves this point, that time cannot change the infernal breed, whatever its label. Time merely enlarges the field in which the German can practice those monstrous acts.
Yeah. And he uses this really striking analogy to drive it home. He talks about a tiger.
Okay.
Even if you tame it outwardly, put it in a zoo, eventually its intrinsic tiger soul will drive it to use fang and claw. It goes back to being a killer because that's his basic nature.
And he applies this directly to Germans.
Directly. He says, with this chilling conviction, no amount of conditionism or reasoning or civilizing past, present, or future will ever be able to change this basic nature. He even compares them to wild animals or a cluster of poisonous reptiles.
Dehumanizing language.
Completely.
Yeah.
Arguing they've lost the wish to be human beings. They are but beasts. They must be dealt with as such.
Yeah.
This dehumanization, casting an entire people as innately savage, unchangeable, it's a critical building block for justifying his total permanent solution.
Because if they're unchangeable beasts, then diplomacy, re-education, borders, none of that will work.
That's exactly his point. He really doubles down against any kind of middle road. He systematically tries to dismantle any alternative solution someone might propose.
Like what?
Well, he dismisses the popular idea that Hitler alone stands between war and peace. Nope, he says the war soul is collective, deeply ingrained. He rejects any idea of reasonable talk with an older generation of Germans, claiming they're gone and forgotten, basically implying any historical wisdom or potential remorse is lost.
What about the idea of a future democratic Germany?
He scoffs at it. He poses this rhetorical question designed to just shut it down. Democracy for a nation that has destroyed a mighty people of some 30 million Poles. Democracy for a people who believe only in superiority, not equality. It's a calculated move to say democracy is fundamentally incompatible with what he sees as the German character.
Okay, what about other political solutions, like breaking Germany up?
He dismisses breaking Germany into small autonomous states. He thinks pan-Germanism, that desire for a unified German nation, would just sweep over such a weak barrier.
And giving Germany a fair share of world resources.
He counters that with total absolutism. Germany does not want a share of anything. She demands all or nothing.
What about re-education, especially for the younger generation?
He sees that as futile, too. He argues the soul is a greater force than the brain, and the war soul would inevitably come to dominate his brain again. So any re-education would just be temporary. Okay, so no political solutions, no re-education. What about just policing them? An international force?
He rejects that too. He warns that being policed forever by an international armed force would just lead to rebellion because suppression begets rebellion.
So after knocking down every single alternative,
his conclusion is unavoidable in his logic and totally uncompromising. There is no middle course, no active mediation, no compromise, no other solution except one, that Germany must perish forever from this earth.
And this is where his argument takes that really, really chilling turn. He starts twisting democratic principles to serve this radical agenda.
How does he do that?
He actually concedes that, okay, maybe not every single German is guilty. He says some fraction of the mass must perforce vary from it. He even throws out a number, granting that as much as 20% of our population is entirely guiltless. Some 15,000 Germans are absolutely innocent.
15 million innocent people. So how does he justify Well, everything else.
He immediately follows up with this deeply provocative question. He asks, shall Poles, Czechs, Slovaks, Austrians, Americans, for we too may ultimately feel the spike of the German boot, shall all these peoples, numbering some 300,000 of the most civilized, suffer constantly and face unnatural death every generation, so that some small part of Germany's populace may continue to exist?
Wow. He's framing it as a choice between the lives of millions of innocents in Germany versus the lives of hundreds of millions elsewhere.
Exactly. And then he appeals to this really uncomfortable, twisted form of democratic principle to justify it. He says, if democracy as Americans know it is majority rule in a national sense, it must be so in an international sense as well. The greatest good for the greatest number is democracy's rule of thumb.
So he's framing genocide as the democratic choice, the greatest good.
That's the implication. It's this masterful, though utterly unethical rhetorical move, flipping the script to present an extreme measure as a rational, even democratic necessity. He's deliberately making the reader squirm, forcing this horrible choice between a minority's existence and the collective security of hundreds of millions.
That's profoundly disturbing.
And he takes this argument even further. He appeals directly to the soldiers, the fighting men. He talks about their rights and demands this sacred promise from their governments.
What kind of rights?
He questions the whole point of fighting if Germanism isn't permanently ended. He asks, why conscript a vast army for democracy's defense? Why train American soldiers to murder a hypothetical enemy when the will which spawned this enemy waxes and grows with each successive bloodbath?
He's tapping into that very real psychological weight of endless conflict here, isn't he? Absolutely. That feeling of, why are we doing this if it's just going to happen again? It's a powerful sentiment. Kaufman uses it to justify his ultimate solution, framing it almost as a duty owed to the soldiers.
Right. He says soldiers have an incontestable duty to demand specific rights. He lists three. First, they need adequate arms for maximum speed in killing.
Okay.
Second, they have a right not to be betrayed by fifth columnists back home.
Standard wartime concern.
But third, and this is the kicker, they demand a definite avowal by his government guaranteeing him once and for all time that this whole ghastly, horrible business of killing the Germans is at an end, that his son may know peace without having to kill for it.
The promise of a final end. No more wars for their children.
And he even issues this chilling warning. If that guarantee isn't given or if it's not upheld, maybe the soldier may not then take such action in his own hand. He compares it to labor strikes or capital withdrawal or even civilian tyranny.
It's a powerful, maybe manipulative appeal to the weary soldier, suggesting that if governments fail to deliver a definitive peace, individuals might just seek it themselves through equally extreme means.
Okay, now we have to confront the absolute heart of Kaufman's book, The Total Penalty itself. His explicit plan for German extinction. He actually starts this section with the phrase, death to Germany.
Doesn't mince words.
Not at all. And he tries to justify this by invoking what he calls German law.
How does that work? Using German law to justify killing Germans?
His logic is disturbingly simple but insidious, he argues. If an individual commits murder, they forfeit their life.
Okay. Standard legal principle in many places.
So he extends that. A nation committing what he defines as premeditated murder upon its fellow nations must therefore forfeit its national life. He claims Germany only recognizes German law, so therefore German law itself must decree its penalty, which is death.
It's a twisted kind of legalism.
Totally. And to back this up, he selectively quotes Heinrich von Treitschke, a prominent German historian and philosopher whose ideas we'll get into more later. He quotes Treitschke saying things like, "The state has the right to make away with men who are undoubtedly injurious to the common weal, and the conscience of every earnest man demands that blood be atoned by blood, and the state makes itself ridiculous if it cannot finally dispose of a criminal."
So he's taking quotes from a German nationalist thinker
and turning them back on Germany itself. He concludes this section with this chilling, almost triumphant line, "Let German will be done." It's a deliberate, calculated attempt to use German philosophy against itself to justify annihilation.
But how did he propose carrying out this death sentence, not literally killing 70 million people?
Surprisingly, no. He actually rejects massacre and wholesale execution. He calls it impractical for a population that large, and also, quite tellingly, inconsistent with the moral obligations and ethical practices of civilization.
So even he draws a line somewhere, or claims to.
Right. Instead, he proposes what he frames as the one mode of ridding the world forces of Germanism, which is to stem the source from which issue those war-lusted souls by preventing the people of Germany from ever again reproducing their kind.
Sterilization.
Eugenic sterilization, he calls it. And he describes it with this veneer of scientific detachment as at once practical, humane, and thorough.
Practical, humane, and thorough. Sterilizing an entire population.
That's how he frames it, and he goes into these very specific, almost clinical details. He emphasizes repeatedly it's not to be confused with castration, trying to make it sound less barbaric.
Right.
He describes it as a safe and simple operation, quite harmless and painless, neither mutilating nor unsexing the patient. He claims it's less distressing than vaccination, not more serious than a tooth extraction.
Minimizing it drastically.
And extremely rapid, taking no more than 10 minutes for males. For females, okay, somewhat more time, but just as safe and simple, with supposedly no records of complications or death.
He rationalizes this how?
He compares it to public health measures, like vaccination and serum treatments. The goal is to immunize itself forever against the virus of Germanism. The language is deliberately chosen to normalize and rationalize this profoundly unethical genocidal procedure, cloaking it in medical terms, making it sound almost like a preventative cure.
The coldness of it is just stark.
And the sheer scope, the logistical audacity of this plan, it's truly staggering. He notes the German population, excluding the conquered areas, is about 70 million, roughly half male, half female.
Okay.
His target is to sterilize some 48,000 of these. He carefully excludes males over 60 and females over 45 because of their, quote, limited procreative power. It's just a cold demographic calculation.
48 million people. And how did he envision doing this, the logistics?
The timeline and methods he outlines are equally chilling in their supposed precision. For males, he figures the army groups, already organized units, would be the easiest and quickest. He just sort of pulls a number out of the air, 20,000 surgeons, each doing 25 operations a day. He claims they could finish the entire male army population in no more than 1 month.
1 month.
Yeah. The civilian male population, he estimates, within 3 months. For females, he projects the entire female population could be done within 3 years or less.
3 years.
And he insists on complete sterilization of both sexes. Why? Because it's necessary in view of the present German doctrine that so much as 1 drop of true German blood constitutes a German.
So he's using Nazi racial theories against them to justify total genetic extinction.
Exactly. It reveals this totalizing approach rooted in the very racial ideas he claims to oppose, all to ensure the complete end of Germany, genetically and nationally.
So what's the end game? What does this achieve in his vision?
Well, the projected outcome is simple. A complete stop to the birth rate in Germany. With a normal death rate, say 2% a year, the population just dwindles by about 1.5 million annually.
So over time?
His ultimate result is that, in the span of 2 generations, the elimination of Germanism and its carriers will have been an accomplished fact. The German will have atrophied and German power reduced to negligible importance.
It's not just a war aim. It's a blueprint for a complete demographic wipeout, framed as the only humane and practical way to stop a perceived existential threat.
And his vision went even further than just the sterilization itself. He laid out this comprehensive post-war world without Germany. He details this very precise hypothetical program for after the sterilization is underway.
What's that involve?
Okay, first, immediately and completely disarm the German army. Remove all weapons. Standard stuff.
Makes sense.
Second, place all German utilities and heavy industrial plants under heavy guard and replace all the German workers with Allied nationals. Total economic control, prevent any resurgence. Third, segregate the sterilized German army members into labor battalions to go rebuild ruined cities across Europe.
Forced labor again?
Fourth, partition Germany completely. Apportion its lands out to neighboring nations. He apparently even included a map in the original source showing how the territory would be divided.
Dismemberment.
Fifth, restrict all German civilian travel outside their new borders until the sterilization is complete. Basically, isolate the remaining population.
Vim contained.
Sixth, compel the Germans in these newly apportioned territories to learn the language of their new area. And within 1 year, stop all German language publications, restrict radio broadcasts, shut down German schools, effectively erase German culture and identity.
Cultural annihilation on top of demographic annihilation.
And there's one tiny exception to the sterilization. Germans whose relatives are citizens of the victorious nations and who agree to take full financial responsibility for their actions.
A bizarrely specific conditional clemency.
Right, so this whole detailed program shows his vision was way beyond just the total penalty of sterilization. It's economic, territorial, cultural subjugation, creating a completely dismembered, denationalized former state. It's not just ending the German people, but ending Germany as a concept, wiping it from the map and from memory. It's almost bureaucratic in its thoroughness for total eradication.
It's systematic and absolute.
So, moving beyond Kaufman's radical solution itself, let's explore how he built his case historically. This is part 4, the historical context of Germanism, according to Kaufman. He argues vehemently that Germanism isn't modern. It's not just Hitler or the Nazis. He says many authors were mistaken to think that.
So where does he trace it back to?
He uses this, highly selective collection of quotes from German writings from before World War I, and he insists they are contemporaneously apropos, meaning they still apply perfectly. He uses them to demonstrate this continuous, unchanging German war soul stretching back centuries.
And what kind of picture does he paint with these quotes?
Oh, it's bleak and completely uniform. He describes Germans as an execrable people who think and dream of nothing but chicanery. Their great joy is supposedly fault-finding, shrieking, and threats. Their life is one of perpetual explosion.
Pretty damning descriptions.
He argues, to love their country is for them to despise, flout, and insult every other country. Claims they're capable of little else but cheating and lying, even to themselves. He says Germans believe the universe belongs to it by right, and incredibly that hate is sacred to them.
Hate is sacred?
Yeah. Their industrial progress, just a means of domination, their geography, only seen through strategical schemes of conquest. He even attributes this belief in divine election to them, saying the German has decided that his race has been elected by God to order the modern world. This relentless dehumanization is absolutely key to his argument.
Because it makes them seem fundamentally different, irredeemable.
Exactly. This is where Kaufman really ties it into his core thesis. He claims this aggressive, deceitful, warlike nature, what he calls the Nazi character, is deeply ingrained. Been there for centuries, just changing labels. Pan-Germans, Nazis, Super-German. He explicitly states, time cannot change the infernal breed, whatever its label. Time merely enlarges the field in which the German can practice those monstrous acts.
It's that chilling historical through line again, suggesting the war soul is an inseparable part of their collective mass soul, making any hope of reform completely futile in his view.
This deep-seated war soul is central to his argument for total extinction, because it posits this unchangeable inherent nature. He contrasts Germany sharply with other civilized nations, which he says painfully and gradually develop virtues like individual rights, the sacredness of human life.
But Germany, according to him, never did.
Right. He claims no Western nation made such a religion of war or a cult of mass murder as Germany. He even attributes German lust for world dominion to some unnamed professor, declaring that since Germany will never be able to understand the world, the latter must be conquered and reformed so that it will be able to conform to German thought.
Wow. Conquer the world so it fits German thinking.
He calls it a form of mass megalomania that's driven German wars for centuries, making his radical solution the only logical outcome in his mind.
And he tries to trace this back even further, to ancient times.
Oh yeah, he delves into ancient Germanic tribes and the war soul, asserts Germanism was born ages ago, its growth proceeding for centuries. He describes these ancient tribes as slave-holding, possessing an unnaturally passionate love of war and destruction.
And he uses sources for this.
He proudly cites a German historian named Sieck, noting ancient Germans were notorious for their villainy and treachery. Their faithlessness became almost proverbial with the Romans. He quotes another German historian, Lamprecht, recounting that even among themselves, the Germans held no pledge valid.
Using German historians against them again?
His conclusion from this is stark. Absolute. Warlike as then have the Germans ever remained. He states flatly, to a German peace is not an objective, but merely an interlude to be used by him to prepare for a war. And he claims, with zero nuance, the German has absolutely no regard for life. There is no such expression in his language as sacredness of human life.
That's a huge claim. How does he illustrate it?
He points to the sinking of the British ship Lancastria during the war. He alleges German pilots deliberately and cold-bloodedly dropped incendiary bombs on the oil-covered waters to roast alive the desperate women and children trying to escape.
Horrific, if true.
And he then claims the German press heralded such cannibalism as an illustrious example of German courage and heroism. Whether that's accurate reporting or embellishment, he uses this graphic anecdote to viscerally reinforce his narrative of inherent German cruelty and a total disregard for human life.
So from ancient tribes to modern atrocities, he paints this unbroken line of barbarism.
Exactly. Then he moves on to what he calls organized Germanism. He argues that this unvoiced doctrine of a master race became a vast and well-organized movement in the late 19th century.
How did it get organized?
He claims it pulled together the doctrines of various German thinkers, teachers, writers, statesmen, philosophers. He names people like Kant, Nietzsche, Hegel, von Bernhardi, Rohrbach, Treitsch, Spengler. He believed because it touched the very roots of the German soul. It got this immediate and tremendously popular response, spreading its malignant dogma throughout the entire world in just 10 years.
So a specific organization.
He pinpoints at Dr. Karl Peters, convening a General German Congress in Berlin in 1886. This merged various national associations into a single German league. Its program was initially vague, but then in 1891, Professor Ernst Hasse became president. And crucially, Hasse appealed to the traditions of the German soul, which led to rapid growth and the league starting its own newspaper.
Okay.
In 1894, it was officially renamed the Pan-German League. And Kaufman asserts this league laid down a program for world conquest so detailed and comprehensive that it was adopted almost unchanged by the Nazis. Their motto, taken from the Great Elector, was this potent call to ethnic loyalty. Remember, you are a German.
So he's painting a picture of a truly systematic, organized effort decades before WWII, a pre-existing ideological framework just waiting for someone like Hitler.
That's the argument. And central to this whole movement, according to Kaufman, was Heinrich von Treitschke.
We heard his name quoted earlier.
Right. Kaufman hails him as a new prophet, spreading the fiery message of Germanism, which he calls a rabid admixture of war, hate, anti-Christism, and destruction. He basically credits Treitschke with being the intellectual father, the apostle of their ideology.
Who's Treitschke?
Born 1834 in Dresden, became a really popular historian and publicist in Berlin, a vehement advocate of Prussianism and its doctrine of the mailed fist rule.
And his teachings.
Yeah.
How does Kaufman portray them? Because this detailing of pre-Nazi thinkers is crucial to Kaufman's whole argument, right? Establishing this long history of the German war soul.
Absolutely crucial. Kaufman paints Treitschke as this fervent warmonger, a might makes right guy, holding students spellbound with lectures on conquer at all costs. Initially, Treitschke apparently saw Europe as Germany's Lebensraum, its living space. But importantly, after the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, he expanded that vision to the entire world, declaring Germany was destined to become the superstate of the universe, holding everyone else in thraldom.
And Kaufman claims these ideas resonated widely.
Deeply. Captured the minds of intellectuals and the masses alike. He argues these teachings weren't outliers, but reflected beliefs, quote, inherent in the German character and innate in his soul. So if these ideas from Treitschke were supposedly so foundational and widely accepted decades before the Nazis, what does that imply about the intellectual and moral landscape in Germany back then? How did that lay the groundwork for something like Germany must perish itself?
It implies, according to Kaufman, a deeply unsettling continuity, a fertile ground just waiting for later extremism to sprout. Treitschke's teachings, as Kaufman's source presents them, are chillingly absolute.
Like what?
He believed the individual exists only for the state, which has the exclusive right to use him as it wills. He saw war not as some regrettable last resort, but as the only and best way for the state's will to be employed.
Might makes right, but only for Germans.
That's what Kaufman quotes. Might makes right only when a German wields the sword. No sacredness of human life. War was sublime precisely because you could murder without passion, elevating it to this cold tool of statecraft. He even apparently advocated that Germany must make it a duty to employ traitors in the enemy state, and that every good German subject is a latent, and when opportunity arises, an active spy.
Wow. That's basically a manual for total moral warfare, undermining any concept of international trust or ethics.
Completely. And what's truly disturbing are Treitschke's views, again, as presented by Kaufman, on truth and treaties. He supposedly openly encouraged lying and deceit as a foundation stone for German policy.
Screenies.
Just mere scraps of paper. They can and must be denounced by Germany whenever the promise they hold become unprofitable. In fact, in such cases, German honor demanded breaking them.
So no international law, no justice.
He explicitly believed there was no international law and order and no such thing as justice except at the point of a German sword. He concluded Germany could never have peace with the world because, to the German way of thinking, the world is a foreign world which cannot be reformed but can only be overthrown.
So Kaufman basically says the German ideal became allied to the rule of evil in a common German effort to annihilate civilization. This comprehensive rejection of international norms, of common morality, is presented as the very bedrock of Germanism.
And the Pan-German League then effectively codified these Treitschkian doctrines into four main actionable principles.
Okay, what were they?
First, watch over and support all German national movements globally, unite all Germans everywhere, irredentism.
Got it.
Second, promote an active German policy and colonial movements, both in Europe and overseas. Explicit expansionism.
Okay.
Third, treat and solve all questions about children's upbringing and higher education strictly in the Germanic sense. Ensure ideological indoctrination from youth.
Control the next generation.
And fourth, quicken patriotic self-consciousness and actively oppose any movements antagonistic to German national development. Suppress dissent, promote nationalism.
And the League's manifesto went further.
Yeah, it made clear that the fate of Germans in Austria, Hungary, Switzerland, Belgium, none of that was indifferent to Germany. It declared, Germanism across the seas must be preserved and fostered. This wasn't just internal German stuff, it was transnational.
And it grew.
Massively. By 1900, 50 subservient associations, military, naval, sports, banking, all pledged to Germanism. By 1903, 43 Reichstag members were apparently initiated. Branches popped up worldwide, New York, Texas.
Extending their influence far beyond Germany.
And they used secret agents, the forerunners of the present-day fifth columnists, compiling that notorious German scrapbook listing enemies. By 1905, Kaufman claims these tenets were known to all. The vicious virus of Germanism had been injected into the life stream of the public, ready for an epidemic. It paints this picture of a truly systematic, organized effort aiming for global dominance decades before WWII even started.
That systematic ambition becomes even clearer when we turn now to Part 5. German expansionist prophecies and activities abroad, all happening pre-WWII. Kaufman claims that way back, as early as 1895, German writers were busy prophesying how and when the ideologic goal of German world dominion would be attained. And he stresses these were serious works, not just fables or idle daydreams.
These aren't just fantasies. They represent this fully formed, deeply ingrained imperial ambition, meticulously imagined and openly discussed. The fact these elaborate, aggressive prophecies existed, not in secret but in published works, is a chilling precursor to the actual aggressive policies that followed, highlights a pervasive cultural mindset.
Give us an example.
Okay, there's a 1900 prophecy looking ahead to around 1950. It foresaw great uneasiness, leading to all Germans uniting. Holland joins the German Union. Flemings gain power in Belgium, leading to German intervention, maybe total annexation if France objects. Vague talk about France, Switzerland, Balkans. Cautiously advises avoiding war with Russia if possible.
And the outcome?
The imagined outcome. In the year 1950, Great World Germany will possess a population of 200 million. Everybody is happy because all the Germans are now united and are ruling the world.
Wow. Okay. But even that was apparently too tame. There was an earlier one from 1895 looking towards around 1915 that was much more radical.
Yeah. Far more specific and aggressive. It predicted around about 1915 the whole world starts trembling. America and Russia take defensive actions, Pan-America Doctrine, customs treaties. Then Great Britain, Pan-America, and Pan-Slavonic Russia supposedly threaten the 16 states of Europe, at which point Germany intervenes, mobilizes its army and navy.
And then
it describes a war where junkers roll in money, and Pan-America causes great uneasiness for Germanism in South America, setting the stage for this global conflict.
And the war itself in this prophecy.
It goes into vivid, almost absurd detail. It imagines the German, Italian, and French navies mobilizing against the U.S. The American Navy is completely destroyed. On land, German troops face down dismissively termed American mercenaries and win quickly. The German leader is triumphant.
What about Britain?
In a naval fight with England, German ships and men prove superior, British Navy destroyed. Finally, German and Italian soldiers seize London. England and America are defeated. It's not just ambition, it's this meticulously imagined scenario of total global conquest.
And the peace terms in this 1895 fantasy are astonishingly specific. A clear roadmap for carving up the world.
Absolutely. Germany takes Mexico, Guatemala, British Honduras, a huge chunk of Brazil south of the Amazon, Uruguay, Paraguay, Bolivia, Peru, northern Chile. France gets northern Brazil, British Guiana, Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador. Italy gets the rest of South America, including Argentina.
Carving up continents?
West Indies divided between Germany and France. Gibraltar to Spain, Malta to Italy, Cyprus to Turkey. England has an enormous war indemnity, its navy held by Germans, Suez Canal shares confiscated, Kimberley diamond mines seized by Germany.
Yeah.
All English-American capital in South America transferred to German hands, even undersea cables taken by Germany.
And the people.
English and American colonists ordered out of South America within a year, never to return. The stated outcome. Thus, England and America are humbled and the rule of the German mailed fist secured. Kaufman even says maps were circulated showing North and Central America as German colonies.
It's incredible. And there were others.
Another prophecy apparently suggested that after humbling England, when it was Germany's turn to deal with the U.S., upon German mobilization, the U.S. just yielded to all her demands without striking a blow.
Wishful thinking, perhaps.
Maybe, but the common theme across all these, despite variations, is that the deification of Germanism cannot be accomplished without the fall and humiliation of both England and the United States. Dr. Paul Samasa apparently stated explicitly in 1902 that Germany must defeat Britons and Americans to then rule the world.
And people noticed this even back then.
Kaufman quotes an observer from 1904, long before the big wars, warning that the doctrine of Germanism may quite well become a national ideal and kindle a very dangerous spirit, urging Anglo-Saxondom to be prepared for Teutonic onrush. These prophecies, detailed, fantastical, reveal this pervasive cultural mindset, preparing the mental ground for aggression later on, even if the specifics didn't pan out.
So these weren't just abstract daydreams. They were detailed, strategic visions, openly discussed. Really underscores the depth of this pre-war expansionist thinking. Now let's look at Germanism abroad. How did these ideas translate into actual organizational efforts in different regions? Starting with the United States.
Okay. The main agent here, according to Kaufman, was the General School Association, later called the German Ausland Organization, or AO. Established way back in 1881. Its purpose, he claims, was to prepare the ground, develop tactics for fifth colonists, long before we used that term.
But it wasn't easy for them in the U.S.
No, they faced big challenges. Professor Hasse, a leading pan-German, apparently declared the grave of Germanism lies in America, and the spade which will dig that grave is the Monroe Doctrine. A clear admission of failure.
Why did it fail?
Many German Americans had fled Germany precisely because of its autocracy. They preferred their American identity, didn't want to import German nationalism. Plus, early German antagonism towards the U.S. trying to form coalitions against it, testing the Monroe Doctrine, consistently failed. Primarily, Kaufman says, because England refused to collude with Germany against the U.S. and supported the Monroe Doctrine, that Anglo-American solidarity was a key obstacle.
So Germany changed tactics.
Yeah, they shifted to taking it easy with the U.S. Dr. Paul Rohrbach apparently said this was just temporary, to eradicate the suspicions Americans had. A tactical retreat, not a change of art. They still saw England and the U.S. as dire enemies because of shared language and philosophies, and actively tried to drive a wedge between them.
And they still hated the Monroe Doctrine.
Oh, yes. Johannes Willer in 1903 called it indefensible, a direct impertinence. But Kaufman quotes a Journal of Commerce article from back then rebutting German claims that the doctrine was an empty pretension, clarifying U.S. policy supported independent South American nations, not U.S. domination, and the U.S. could enforce it.
So, frustrated by direct challenges, they tried infiltration.
Exactly. German HQ instructed agents to try and create a state within a state in the U.S. Professor Hasse advised organizing the German element so political power will finally fall into its lap, forming a separate national political party. Professor Münsterber agreed, build a state within a state. Others suggested more insidious tactics like infecting Americans, especially Irish Americans, with Anglophobia to divide the Anglo-American alliance, even proposed a confidential agent in Washington.
Did any of this work?
Kaufman actually concedes the movement had not able to maintain that any real progress had been made in the U.S. before the rise of Nazi Germany and its direct export of agitators and spies. So, big ambitions, but largely ineffective execution in the U.S., maybe because American identity was just too strong.
Okay, now South America, a region Germans apparently always coveted as a land which someday would belong to them.
And they fully expected a showdown with the U.S. over the Monroe Doctrine there. They foresaw it, prepared for it, and believed, maybe wishfully, the U.S. would yield without striking a blow or lose a short war. Germans there were instructed to be prepared for that day, revealing this long-term strategic goal for the region.
This was a critical objective then.
Absolutely. Professor Schultz-Governitz emphasized that the more Germany was blocked by the U.S. elsewhere, the more they had to defend their interests in Central and South America. This meant needing a fleet strong enough to make Americans think twice about enforcing the Monroe Doctrine.
And the strategy wasn't just military.
No, it involved encouraging German colonists to preserve their nationality, language, German ways, create those states within states, especially in Brazil, where large German communities existed. Dr. Kapf openly advised Germans in South Brazil to become Brazilian citizens as the quickest and surest way to obtain political power. He explicitly identified the U.S. North America as the main danger to Germanism in South America.
Others echoed this.
Oh, yeah. Professor Gustav Schmoller insisted at all costs a German country must grow up in the 20th century in Brazil to be a blessing to the old country and a model to the whole world. It wasn't just economics. It was about planting a German cultural and political flag on another continent. Dr. Paul Rohrbach argued that even if the U.S. stopped them grabbing territory, it couldn't stop a state within a state, where Germans would eventually rule the roost in Brazil and rule over the inferior peoples. He called for propaganda in Germany, urging agents to work quietly, jointly, and firmly underground. Professor Wolff called South America the land of the future for Germans, better than Europe or Africa.
And their view of the U.S. fueled this.
Their dismissive view of the U.S., this heterogeneous melange of crass, egoistic jingoists having no pure racial blood, easily beaten by German supermen, certainly fueled their aggression. Prince Solms Braunfels even tried, unsuccessfully, to found a German colony in Texas as an American outpost of Germanism early on.
So how did they operate underground?
The Pan-German League worked in partial silence in South America, honeycombing regions, setting up branches, using confidential agents, travelers, teachers, diplomats. German consulates were apparently complicit, acting as hypodermics, spreading the malignant bacilli of Germanism. A Dr. Unfold, focusing on Chile, advised German settlers to send kids back to Germany for education in the fitting German spirit, then return to propagate the animus of the German war soul. He predicted Germany would grab colonial territory during an international conflagration.
And again, people saw this coming.
Kaufman quotes an observer from almost 40 years before WWII, warning that South America's fate depended on the Monroe Doctrine, the U.S. Navy, and crucially, solidarity of England and the United States. That observer noted economic penetration could lead to political supremacy, and conceivably the issue may be a fighting one. If America cries, hands off, they must have the power to support the words. This decades-long planning highlights this deeply ingrained imperial dream, meticulously imagined and openly discussed.
This section really hammers home the extent of the Pan-German League's reach, the detailed, multi-pronged strategies across continents, decades before WWII. A truly systematic approach to asserting German dominance, tailored, however unsuccessfully sometimes, to each region, exploiting tensions, demographics. Now let's look closer to home in Europe, starting with Austria. Kaufman claims true Germanism there was like primitive paganism with some modern refinements expressed through violence. The aim, he suggests, was even to eradicate Christianity, seeing the main religions as obstacles.
And their strategy in Austria was particularly cynical, according to Kaufman. Pit believers against each other, then deliver a final knockout blow to all. This was tested in Austria, amounting to organized high treason. A guy named Schönerer started a movement in 1878, which later linked up with Huss's Pan-German League in Berlin, making it coordinated.
What was their specific plan in Austria?
Force Austria to break with Rome, with Catholicism. They created this artificially stimulated pseudo-religious revivalist movement with virulent anti-Semitism as its main goal, using renegade so-called Catholics as leaders, a frightful wave of anti-Semitic persecution. Then, a rabid anti-Catholic Free from Rome movement. Schönerer declared, chains which tie us to a church hostile to Germanism must be broken. They even used paid pseudo-evangelical freebooter German clergymen to attack Catholics. While it didn't fully achieve its religious goal, Kaufman argues it firmly established German audacity and ruthless aggressiveness.
What about Czechoslovakia?
There, despite fierce resistance, Germans organized associations and press, helped by imported German clergy, agitators, schoolmasters spreading German influence. But the Czechs fought back hard, fierce and patriotic intensity, rallying around Jan Hus's motto, nothing German.
So resistance worked.
It was strong enough that by 1900, leading Germans apparently admitted the fate of their movement lay in Bohemia, implying a major setback. They also actively interfered with establishing the Czech language, a key part of national identity. Kaufman credits Czechoslovakia for fighting German dominion alone, even before becoming a recognized nation.
Okay, Holland. Germany had complex ambitions there.
Yeah, they dreaded Russia, wanted Britain and the US at odds, but really desired to absorb Holland, a free and democratic country which hated Germanism. The General Dutch League, supposedly for spreading Dutch in South Africa, was actually entirely supported by the Pan-German League, a front.
How did Germany view Holland?
As an essential and integral part of Germany. Plan A, peaceful persuasion. Plan B, force. German writers openly said Dutch ports wouldn't be neutral in war, Kurt von Strauss proclaimed in 1901. It is impossible that outposts of Germanism like the Netherlands, Belgium, Switzerland, and Austria remain permanently outside the boundaries of Germany. Others suggested grabbing Dutch colonies for naval bases or protecting them from England, US, Japan.
Did it work in Holland?
Despite stirring mischief and agitation, Germanism had unable to achieve any marked success. Dutch intellectual freedom and national identity were too strong. Germans dismissively labeled the Dutch Low Germans, seen as a negligible factor, easily forced to bow to the German will. The tactic was insidious. Popularized Flemish over French to create a Flemish nationality, driving a wedge between France and Belgium, done through underground channels due to Belgian suspicion. They even renamed Belgium German Westmark in 1901, symbolically claiming it. No finesse there. Tried to ram Germanism down their throats. Failed. Danes were independent, civilized people with no inclination to be dragged back 1,000 years to savage barbarism.
Switzerland.
Similar story. Tactless and stupid blunders by the German League. Proclaiming Switzerland an annex of Germany with no culture or freedom met intense antagonism, fierce backlash. The Swiss declared, "We Swiss are no Germans!"
Ironically offered William Tell, a German classic, as proof of their independent spirit.
Scandinavia, Norway, and Sweden.
Germans were least like there, little success for the League. But Kaufman notes, Norwegians and Swedes of a German character who paid allegiance, foreshadowing figures like Quisling in Norway. Professor Samasa predicted Sweden would eventually join Germany, so Germany should initially preserve its independence for later absorption. Looking at all these efforts, this consistent systematic approach, what were the big goals, and what lessons were learned or maybe not learned from these early attempts at infiltration, especially where they failed, like the U.S.? The overarching goal seems clear. Global cultural and political dominance, justified by this belief in inherent German superiority. What's striking is the scale, the longevity decades before the World Wars. The failures, like in the US, Denmark, Switzerland, they highlight how resilient national identities and democratic institutions can be against this stuff.
But the partial successes, or the strategic patience.
That underscores a long-term ideological commitment that went beyond specific leaders or regimes. The lesson, maybe, is that these ambitions weren't fleeting. They were deeply rooted, according to Kaufman's perspective.
Which leads us perfectly into the final part.
Right. Now we arrive at part 6, lest we forget. Kaufman's ultimate chilling prophecy of failure and his final choice presented to the reader. This is his stark hypothetical future if his total penalty isn't adopted. He warns passionately against repeating past mistakes, appeasement, misplaced sentiment.
How does he paint this future? It must play directly on the fears of 1941.
Oh, absolutely. U.S. enters the war, Allies win, Germany defeated, sues for peace. Sound familiar? Then armistice. And immediately, Germany starts its propaganda machine again. Appeals to humanity, justice, God and mercy, aimed at the Allied statesmen.
Using words Kaufman clearly despises.
He calls them weak, sticky phrases designed to befuddle the weary minds and exhausted emotions of the war-torn democracies. In this sudden lush of a peace that is no peace, all the war sacrifices are forgotten. The plight of drained countries, the true nature of the German beast, the duty to future generations, all ignored. Precisely as in 1918, he says, the inevitability of the coming of the next German leader is conveniently forgotten in the relief of peace.
And the Allies fall for it again.
In his scenario, yes. The Allied statesmen cannot resist such an appeal. They fall victim to what he sees as their own weakness. They forget the struggle was not a sports contest, that their adversary was a beast, not a human being. So, filled to overflowing with the infectious germ of sentiment, they stretch out their hand to their fallen opponent and help him arise.
Patting him on the back.
Metaphorically, yeah. No hard feelings, old man. Then they go home, believing, sincerely, the German war will not come again. believing that somehow, in some inexplicable manner, Germany has accepted Christ. It's a scathing indictment of what he views as naive humanism, almost a betrayal of the war's real purpose.
And then what happens in his prophecy?
Then, just a single decade passes. A decade of hard work, sacrifice for the democratic peoples, genuinely trying to build a better world for their children, working for progress, peace. But meanwhile, under the surface, Germany, unpunished, unconstrained, grows strong and robust, rearming.
Its army gets larger and more powerful, develops new weapons whose frightfulness surpass all imagination, secretly rearming, innovating. Germany finds a new leader, inevitably, in Kaufman's view, and her war-souled people are bent once again upon conquering the world. The cycle, because it wasn't broken, inexorably repeats. Like a cobra, Germany is poised. She strikes.
And
This time, the civilized nations, once victors, are stunned. They exclaim, "But it cannot be again." But Kaufman insists with chilling certainty it is, and this time it is too late. Germany wins, unequivocally, becomes mistress of the world.
A dark future.
He writes that the sun shivers upon a dark world where slaves to the German are children once free, civilization is no more, perversity is raged rampant. This, he declares, is finally Deutschland über alles. It's an incredibly powerful conclusion, his ultimate warning, framing his radical solution, total annihilation, as the only way to break this inescapable cycle of war, playing directly on fears of complacency, the deep desire for real, lasting peace, arguing anything less than total eradication is a betrayal of both past and future generations.
And then the final stark choice for the listener, for the reader back then, Kaufman asks, shall it be so? He offers no middle ground, no nuance. He leaves you, the reader, with this deeply unsettling binary question. Our choice lies still before us, false sentiment or courageous decision. Which shall it be?
It's a highly manipulative rhetorical device, isn't it? Designed to funnel you towards his single, extreme solution. There are only two options, and one is clearly framed as weak and naive.
Absolutely. It's an incredibly stark, unsettling closing argument, meant to provoke a very specific, very dramatic response. This whole deep dive into Germany must perish really forces you to confront the kind of extreme perspectives that can bubble up during global conflict when that search for lasting peace leads some people to proposals that just shatter the boundaries of human morality.
It certainly does.
So, recapping our deep dive today into Germany Must Perish by Theodore N. Kaufman. He reveals this document that, deeply controversial, but it captures a certain raw, almost desperate sentiment from those early days of World War II.
Right. It's a testament, in a way, to how far some individuals were willing to push their thinking to imagine a definitive end to conflict, even if that meant proposing the systematic sterilization of an entire nation as a total penalty, all to eliminate what Kaufman perceived as this inherent German war soul.
This document really is a stark example of how, in wartime, the human mind can grapple with these huge questions: collective guilt, historical cycles, the search for absolute solutions, however horrifying.
And our goal here was simply to unpack its arguments, understand the context where such a proposal could even be conceived and discussed, and also see how it was immediately seized upon and used by both sides in the information war.
It's a sobering reminder, isn't it, that historical documents, even extreme ones like this, offer crucial insights into the mindsets that shape events, and how easily a fringe idea can be weaponized in a time of crisis.
Definitely.
So as we close out this deep dive, maybe something to think about. What does the very existence and the varied reception from sensational idea to propaganda tool of a book like Germany Must Perish tell us about the pressures and fears of a world teetering on the brink, and about the often deeply uncomfortable proposals that emerge when humanity feels pushed to its absolute limits?
It makes you wonder, doesn't it, about how those lines between righteous indignation and extreme retribution can blur, maybe even dissolve, in the heat of total war, compelling some people to embrace the most unthinkable solutions in the name of peace.